Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. I'm happy to inform you that in today's webinar, we have more than 200 participants actually joining us today from different countries. We have people from Thailand, from Vietnam, from the Philippines, from Malaysia. We have attendees from India, as well as in the USA. We have different parts of Europe and attendees from Africa, and as well as many other countries. And we'd like to thank you and welcome you all in this webinar today. We are just waiting for some of our attendees to come in and join us. We'll give them a little more time to settle down, and we will begin this webinar very shortly. And we have an exciting topic today with our experts to teach us and to share their expertise and learnings in today's topic. I know you all are excited. I am excited. So let's just sit back for a while, relax, while we wait for our attendees to come in. All right, once again, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us in another eFeedLink webinar. My name is Alvin, and I'm your host for today. And before we get started, I'd like to share a little bit about eFeedLink and our services. eFeedLink.com is one of the most visited feed and livestock industry website. Our species-focused website is dedicated channels covering the latest market news, hot topics, and technical information, and as well as industry interviews and event highlights and company updates in the feed and livestock industry. Our magazine, Livestock and Feed Business, is the preferred magazine for key decision makers from the feed and livestock industry. Stay abreast of emerging market developments, industry happenings, and technologies. Please do subscribe to Livestock and Feed Business at efeedlink.com. And if you cannot receive a print copy, we are happy to send you the digital copy of the magazine on a monthly basis. And finally, you can organize webinars on our eFeedLink Agri Digital Hub platform, targeted specifically to the livestock and feed industry. You may visit agrihub.efeedlink.com to view and sign up for all our future webinars. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A box in your Zoom control panel, and we are happy to bring them up during the Q&A session at the end of the presentations. Today, we are learning on improving energy metabolism, the effects on poultry performance and beyond. And to share their knowledge and expertise of today's topic, eFeedLink has invited experts April Santos, nutritionist at Evonik Industries Philippines, and Dr. Peter Chrystal, Poultry Nutritionist in New Zealand. Our first speaker is April Santos. April holds a bachelor's degree in agriculture, major in animal science, from the University of Philippines in Los Baños. With 14 years of experience as an animal nutritionist, she has been the Senior Technical Service Manager for Monogastrics Specialty Nutrition at Evonik Animal Nutrition since May of 2023. Previously, she served as product expert for precision livestock farming for Asia South at Evonik and held different roles, including technology applications manager for poultry and formulator in an animal nutrition company. Without further ado, please help me welcome our first speaker for today, April Santos.
Yeah, so let me share now my screen and good day to everyone. So it's good evening, good morning, and good afternoon. So in the next few minutes, I will be discussing about unlocking opportunities with Evonik through improved animal energy metabolism. And I will discuss about how GuanAMINO works, its mode of action, how do we use it in formulation, and also beating our own best with GuanAMINO. So first, we have probably heard already about creatine. It started with sports nutrition, so it is being used by athletes when they're doing severe activities or intense activities, and that actually helped them to cope up with those activities, increase muscle strength, and also improve recovery and generate a more lean muscle. Um, more than a decade ago, we also have already seen the importance and value of creatine in animal nutrition. So in raw meats like chicken, beef, lamb, and tilapia, we have actually are seeing a creatine content of around 4,000 to 4,500. More than 90% of the creatine is stored in muscle cells. So creatine is actually very important and plays a critical role in terms of energy metabolism. It also helps in providing this storage form, which is creatine phosphate, and guanidinoacetic acid, or our guanamino, is the precursor for creatine. So we have also seen the developments in terms of broiler genetics. Modern broiler genetics actually require higher creatine for healthy growth. Past years or decades have been focused on improving growth rate, early harvest. We also focus on improving genetics to have more efficient feed conversion, and lately is more focused on generating more breast meat yield. So you can imagine, like in 1972, there's 11% breast meat yield. Now in 2022, we have already around 23%. And this increasing proportion of muscle weight actually demands higher creatine intake. This modern broader genetics changes also have an effect on the energy use efficiency. Again, there's more breast meat yield and less fat in modern broader genetics. And we all know that in fat deposition, it requires more energy than the protein deposition. So this dotted line here in the graph actually shows that there has been a decreasing efficiency in terms of energy use. And here, it's really important that we look for ways how to improve further the energy use in modern broilers. And again, creatine will play a critical role in improving this efficiency. So now I will be discussing what is the metabolic pathway of creatine synthesis. So our body and even the animal body, they produce creatine in the body. First, it's that the process starts in kidney. With arginine and glycine plus this enzyme agat, we're able to produce GAA. And it will be transported from kidney to the liver, um, and is being methylated to produce creatine. So yeah, in this process, I would like to highlight two things. First is that we might be thinking that adding more arginine will help us produce more GAA, but that is not the case, because the levels of creatine and this ornithine actually has a negative feedback on the production of agat, which is an important enzyme in the production of GAA. So if we have downregulation of this agat, then we can expect a low production of GAA. That is why supplementation of dietary GAA is important. Also, we need methionine in the process to convert GAA. Either it's the de novo synthesis or the dietary GAA to convert it to creatine. Here, we would like to highlight the importance of providing the sufficient amount of methionine, because not only that it is the limiting amino acids, but it is the activated methionine is the only a source of or the only methyl donor that can convert GAA into creatine. Then the creatine in the liver will be transported to the muscle cells through the blood. This is where creatine serves its function. So there are two things, the main functions of creatine. It acts as transport energy from the mitochondria to the cytosol. We know already the ATPs produced as the from the lipids and other nutrients. So this ATP is actually produced in the powerhouse of the cell, which we call the mitochondria. But this is not the site where it needs to be used or to be consumed. So it needs to be transported into the cytosol. And creatine here plays a critical role. So you can imagine if we don't have enough creatine, we might be just producing energy in the mitochondria, but we are not able to transfer it to the site where it is needed. The second thing is that it works as energy buffer or storage for high and fluctuating energy demands. So if you have more creatine, then we have more phosphocreatine. Again, this is the storage form of creatine. We also know in reality that birds or animals, they go through different challenges on a daily basis. Sometimes the requirement for maintenance energy is low, sometimes it's high. So during the times of high maintenance requirement or during stress periods, it's critical that we are able to provide necessary energy for that maintenance so as not to affect performance. So this is summarizing the importance and the metabolic pathway of creatine synthesis. Again, GAA or guanidinoacetic acid is the only and immediate precursor for creatine. So here I am showing the creatine requirement estimation over time in broilers. And we know for a fact that two-thirds is only supplied via the animal's own creatine synthesis, and one-third of it have to be supplied via feed. Other than this, there's also a daily degradation rate of creatine into creatinine, which is going through urine. So here we need to talk about how can we able to supply creatine via feed. First, plant proteins does not contain creatine. The only source of creatine in feed can be animal protein. So here we have different sources like MBM, we have poultry byproduct meal, and we also have fish meal. So the thing is that at even if we have these sources, you can see the high variability in terms of creatine levels from these animal proteins. And also, let's take for an example fish meal with the highest creatine level at 5% inclusion, which is already on the high level. It can only provide around 55,550 milligrams per ton of feed, which is still not enough to close the creatine requirement. So with this one, we have GuanAMINO, which can close that gap. And good thing with GuanAMINO is that we're able to provide the sufficient and stable source of creatine for animals. So this is just also to show that guanidinoacetic acid supplementation can really close the muscle requirement, muscle creatine requirement. So this is the different levels of supplementation of GAA, and this is the creatine in the muscle relative to percentage of negative control. And here we can see that creatine level in muscles can be increased by guanidinoacetic acid supplementation, again as the precursor to creatine, to a magnitude of 10 to 20%. So this clearly shows that dietary supplementation of GAA can really provide that creatine need in the muscles. So we know now and we already understand the role of creatine in terms of energy metabolism, how it can be important in terms of improving energy use efficiency. Now with this, guanamino provide us actually two different approaches in terms of how we can use it in our formulations or in animal nutrition. First is on top supplementation. So we add guanamino as is. With that, we're able to improve performance. It can provide higher ROI from improved feed conversion, body weight gain, higher breast milk yield, and also for breeders, we can see more marketable DOCs. So given the efficient use of energy, we can also apply nutritional matrix application, and this nutritional matrix application helps us to optimize diet costs. spares high cost ingredients. We can also decrease feed costs from the efficient energy use and while maintaining performance. So this two application approach, it seems easy to do, but how are we able to maximize this in terms of profitability is a complex application approach. So just to also share with you the more than a decade of experience of Evonik with working with GAA, here are some information and data that we have collected over the years. With on-top supplementation approach, we are able to see an average of 5-point improvement in FCR and also 56 grams increase in body weight gain. This is coming from more than 50 broader field trials with, again, with on-top supplementation. Here's also a meta analysis which confirms the performance of GAA. So with increasing levels of GAA, we're able, yeah, we can see clearly that it can improve FCR, body weight gain, and also breast meat yield. So that is again a meta-analysis with on-top supplementation approach. Here are some trials related to the energy sparing of GAA. This is a 48 observations from 20 independent energy sparing trials. So here, this is the relative performance compared to control for both body weight gain improvement and also FCR improvement. If you can see here, most of the research is showing that we can spare a minimum of 50 kcal. That is the same for body weight gain and FCR, and with the potential of up to 100 kcal energy sparing. So typically, oil can be reduced in the diet or other high energy density feeds can be decreased, which is leading to an overall feed cost reduction. So the value that we are getting from GuanAMINO is really mainly on energy, but we know the volatility of the market. Sometimes we need more opportunity to squeeze in with the current solutions that we have. So let's say we are already maximizing the value of GuanAMINO with energy efficiency, then there is more opportunity that we can capture from guanamino, which is the dietary arginine sparing. So if we can recall, the first step to produce GAA is that it is requiring arginine and glycine. And if we supply dietary GAA, then we are skipping that part. So here we created, there's a study looking at the effect of supplemental arginine and also with and without GAA in terms of feed conversion ratio. Let's look at 1.65 FCR. Here with GAA supplementation, the level of supplementation of L-arginine is just 0.051%. At same FCR of 1.65 without GA added on the diet, it requires higher level of supplemental arginine, which is 0.097. So this scientific data actually proves that guanamino spares at least 77% arginine at a dosage level of 600, especially in broilers. So this is just the minimum information that we see, but there are more studies showing a potential of 143% sparing with arginine. So the economic customer benefit results in the spared arginine multiplied with the arginine price. So again, this is just additional benefit that we can squeeze in from using guanamino. So in summary, the benefits of guanamino is that it can provide an improvement in performance with on-top application, basic an average of 5 points FCR improvement and also 56 grams body weight gain improvement. For nutritional matrix, we can use a sparing of a minimum of 50 kcal up to 100, where we can use this matrix in our formulation together with the arginine sparing. So again, as I mentioned, it seems easy to apply, but there's really an opportunity to maximize the benefit from guanamino. So the question now is, which approach would give me the maximum economical benefit given the volatility of ingredient and meat prices? Will it be on top, or should I use nutritional matrix, or is it possible to actually use it both? So now, again, with the more than 10 years experience of Evonik working with GAA, we can now give a more customized recommendation on how GAA can be used effectively and efficiently with our guanamino tool. So just to provide a glimpse of how we can optimize performance and profitability with our guanamino tool, this tool will be just asking for some basic and advanced inputs. Basic inputs is basically the feeding program, what is our current nutrient densities. Advanced inputs will ask about your current ingredient prices, what are your main energy sources, grain and oil, what is your target performance, and providing those inputs will actually help us identify which is the best approach for me. So with these inputs, our GuanAMINO tool will provide you four different application approaches. First is the set energy sparing. So here we can set a specific amount of energy sparing from GuanAMINO. Let's say you would like to be conservative with just 50 kcal, but in reality, again, we can spare it from 50 to 100 kcal. So the benefit that we are getting from set energy sparing is that we can reduce feed cost from the energy sparing, and let's say there's more to spare, then that additional energy can contribute to performance improvement. So this is the benefit that we will get from this approach. Next approach is matrix. Here we would like to maximize the reduction in feed cost without losing broiler performance. So the main benefit, or the savings that we will get here is more on feed cost. With our tool, we will be able to also to identify what will be the energy sparing in the different stages of broiler production. Fixed feed cost is actually just simulating what is the level of energy that I can spare that will compensate for the cost of guanamino. Here, we have some objectives of really not, we do not want our feed cost to change. And how the customers will benefit here is that they will see an performance improvement without change on feed cost. And lastly is the on-top application. Here, we really are looking at the performance improvement of guanamino. So with this four, we're able to really maximize what is the potential. So the tool will provide you different solutions in changing market scenarios. So again, it's thinking about it, it's not easy to understand and identify which approach will be best for me, but having this tool will provide us that scenario. So in this case, fixed feed cost provided the highest total savings and benefits, which mean this approach is the best approach that we can go for. Again, with changing market scenarios, the total savings and benefits might change. With that, I have talked a lot about guanamino, and as Evonik, we are committed of not only providing really a quality product, but also services that will help our customers further maximize its profitability. We have our aminosis portfolio. We have a gravimetric dosing system for guanamino. We know the importance of microingredients, even if at lower inclusion, we need those ingredients to maximize performance. And and the challenge is that we need to make sure that these micro ingredients are mixed well, efficiently, and also dosed correctly. This is why we have this gravimetric dosing system that we can also offer with our guanamino. It can dose from zero point 0.1 to 10 kilos per batch with gravimetric discharging. some advantages is that it can be easily installed since it's also discharging only by gravity. It needs to be installed above mixer level. So specific weight, particle size does not really play a big role. And the capacity of storage is 100 liters. In the case of guanamino, it can store up to 70 kilos. It also has a surge hopper with a grid that will avoid contamination. And if you have our existing amino acids, it can also be equipped with amino acids control system. Other than this, we also have our Evonik analytical services where we can quantify GAA and also do amino acid analysis. So in the quantification of GAA, it's not only that we need to check if GAA was dosed properly, this will also show us the stability of GAA after feed processing. We also have seen in the process of creatine synthesis the importance of different amino acids like um, glycine, arginine, and methionine. So we also have amino acid analyzers which can analyze amino acids in our animal feeds and raw materials. So with that, GuanAMINO is our energy booster for animal performance. It provides excellent handling characteristics with a minimum of 96% GAA content. We have a patent also for granulation, which contributes for easy handling, flowability, stability, and also dust free. We also offer the best energy source, not only that we have two production sites that will ensure supply security. We also are committed in providing the quality, the best quality in the market. So one thing that we can commit with our customers is really on quality. We have seen several sources already of GAA in the market, and one thing that we have been seeing in other sources is also the levels of melamine. So we are continuously monitoring the levels of melamine, and we have seen really significant levels of melamine contamination in other sources. And other than that is that we have outstanding technical service and nutritional consulting with also committed with system solution partner instead of just single molecule provider. We also, with GuanAMINO, will provide returns over feed costs, and it also has a positive effect on animal welfare and health. So, in summary, for broiler breeder, we have seen an improvement in terms of hatchability, fertility, that also leads for more marketable day-old chicks. Layers, we have seen an improvement on hen day egg production, egg mass, and also eggshell quality. For broilers, as I have shown you, on top supplementation provides an improvement in terms of performance by FCR and body weight gain. And beyond performance, we can use guanamino in energy and arginine sparing. It can also provide still high performance even under heat stress, improve carcass quality, and it can reduce breast meat myopathies. So those things beyond performance is something that Dr. Peter will also talk about in this afternoon. So with that, thank you, and I'll give the floor back to Alvin.
Right. Thank you, April, for that very, very insightful presentation. And before I will proceed, or we will proceed to our next speaker for today, I would like to invite first everyone to take a short poll. Uh, we will appreciate your answers and participation to this poll. Right. Our next speaker is Dr. Peter Chrystal. Dr. Chrystal boasts an impressive educational background and over 40 years of experience in the global poultry industry. He earned a bachelor's degree in agriculture, animal science from the University of Natal in Pietermaritzburg, South Africa. and completed a management development program at the Graduate Business School in University of Stellenbosch in South Africa. He also holds a PhD in animal nutrition from the University of Sydney, Australia. And Dr. Chrystal has honed his extensive expertise at leading organizations such as Rainbow Chicken Farm, Tegel, Bayada, and Bromley Park hatcheries. Additionally, he has expanded his industry network by consulting for numerous poultry companies in the Asia Pacific region. Peter has presented at a number of conferences around the globe and been both author and co-author of several peer-reviewed publications. Now, without further ado, please help me welcome our next speaker for today, Dr. Peter Chrystal.
Thank you, Alvin, for the introduction, and good day to everyone. I'll use the Australian one, then I don't have to do good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Let me see if I can get beyond the screen sharing and make sure that we get it right. The challenge always with these things is making sure that we can get the sharing absolutely right. So what I have got here in front of me is hopefully the correct screen. I'm going to talk a little bit about the effects of guanidino acetic acid beyond performance. And of course, what I'm going to do with this is probably go through a whole lot of data that is really trial data. I think that's kind of important to do. And let me get rid of the laser pointer and then move on. So what is the outline of the presentation? We're going to talk about GAA and dietary energy. Then I'm going to talk about GAA in heat stress broilers. I think this is really important, particularly for the areas I work in Southeast Asia. Then meat myopathies. This is something that's come to the fore in the last few years. Meat quality is really, really important, and it's become a big focus of the geneticists. And then I'll also talk a little bit about GAA and breeders and their progeny. Now, what is GAA? I mean, this is an old molecule. If you have a look at it, it was actually first prepared in 1861 by, guess what, a German man by the name of Strecker. And it's really interesting because, of course, Evonik is also a German company. So it is quite appropriate that Evonik is actually looking at this molecule and producing it. In terms of the metabolic pathway, I'm not going to go through this. We've already been through all of this. But bear in mind that creatine exists in a whole range of cells, not just the liver. And arginine glycine, the aminotransferase enzyme, is the one that transfers the amino group from arginine to glycine. And remember that you're using up glycine and you're using up arginine in the creation of creatine through GAA. I think the only important thing about this particular slide is that very last point. I'll certainly leave all of the points up there, but L-ornithine, which is the byproduct, and I found this out yesterday, it's a non-proteinogenic amino acid, so it isn't included in protein of muscle, but it does play a very important role in the urea cycle. And I think the thing that I found interesting, it is an acute satiety signaling amino acid in the neonatal chick. So the more ornithine there is in the body, the less the bird will eat, which is not a good thing for us as poultry producers. Also, I think it's important to note that creatine is synthesized in other tissues, pancreas, kidneys, and liver. We also know that the highest concentrations occur in muscle, heart, spermatozoa. I found this one very interesting. And there's some data to support increased fertility, particularly in broiler breeders. And I tend to have a kg of GAA as standard in my breeder diets. Eyes also a high demand for creatine. So anything that requires high levels of energy will require high levels of creatine. So let's talk about this energy. And again, this we've already seen. Remember, energy production happens in the mitochondria, but that energy needs to be transferred across the membranes into the cytosol, which we've already heard. So I won't spend time on that. Creatine phosphate is a high energy storing molecule of the muscle. And in rested muscle, creatine phosphate is the dominant form. Its maximum concentration is five times higher than that of ATP. And when we need this energy, creatine phosphate is used for this rapid phosphorylation of ADP to the upregulated adenosine triphosphate. Spermatozoa photoreceptor cells, remember that I've mentioned those, and I think that is really, really important. And it has also been suggested that high energy phosphates help to maintain membrane potentials. They participate in neurotransmitter release, and they contribute to calcium homeostasis and play, of course, also roles in neuronal migration, survival, and apoptosis. Creatine is required as a cofactor for adenosylate kinase and other enzymes. So let's talk about the first trial. And this is one that was run in Jordan. And essentially what we were looking at is the ability of GAA against an enzyme and its advantage in terms of performance. So what we did was we had 600 grams of GuanAMINO in this particular case, GAA per ton, and we also compared it against an NSP enzyme. What you can see quite clearly when you look at FCR, the positive control has got a great FCR. And of course, if you've reduced your energy in the negative control and you add in GAA, you can see that it's brought it right back to the same level as the positive control. And then, of course, here we have a negative control plus an enzyme, not quite in line, but pretty close, around about 2 points of FCR, slightly different to the GAA result. There's also another trial that was run looking at corn, soybean meal-based diets. And this was a trial that was run specifically to look at starter, grower, and finisher levels of energy contribution. And it's interesting that a recent trial run by Avigen kind of came up with the same result. So GAA is really interesting from an energy sparing point of view at the cellular level. I won't go through each of those treatments. It's obviously a very complex trial. But if we look at the graph and you look at the starter diet, one can see quite clearly that GAA saved 57 kilocalories in the starter phase. Now, I have an interesting view on energy. When I formulate based on energy of raw materials, I tend to use the value of the product that is oxidized. So if you put it into a bomb calorimeter and you literally burn the product, that energy that's created is the one that I use. In reality, energy exists at a bird level. And quite honestly, when you talk about energy and net energy at the bird level, one can see very clearly that something like GAA has a dramatic impact at the cellular level and has a much greater energy contribution than just the oxidized value of the product itself. And we do this all the time with enzymes. I mean, we certainly give phytase and NSPAs enzymes much higher values for energy than their oxidized value would give you. And it's just a reflection that energy, in fact, exists at the bird level rather than being part of the diet, which makes it very complex. If one looks at the next one, which is the grower phase, oops, I've gone too far ahead. So if one looks at the grower phase, you can see quite clearly 79 kilocalories. And as we go to the finisher phase, we're up to 91 kilocalories. So as these birds age, the value of GAA becomes increasingly greater. And I think this happens in broiler breeders as well, which is really, really interesting. Here's another trial on Ross 308-day-old chicks run from 0 to 42 days of age. And in this particular case, what they did was they reduced energy by 0.21 of a megajoule, so that's 50 kilocalories, and added then 600 grams of GAA to that reduced energy diet. And then they did a second negative control where they reduced the energy by 100 kilocalories and added the 600 grams of GAA. If one looks at the measurements of growth performance, one can see quite clearly that the result of the positive control and negative control would predict exactly what we say, much lower weight gain or live weight in those that received the negative control. What was interesting is this 50 kilocalories plus GAA actually took us to significantly improved live weight over the positive control. And again, the negative control to this is 100 kilocal reduction, very similar to the 50 kilocal, although a little bit behind the Ross 308 levels. It's important also in terms of the studies I've done, AME tends to be a very poor predictor of performance, particularly calculated AMEs of either tables or equations. So it is interesting to see that this result is pretty much in line with what we see. Feed conversion, positive control, negative control. Remember that these two are not adjusted for the same weight. So you can see certainly the weight, but you can see what happens when you take 50 kilocalories out and you add GAA. You get this surprising improvement in FCR, which is really, really interesting. And then, of course, the 100 kilocal level, about the same level as the positive control. Of course, these are not statistically significant, and you just need to bear that in mind. What about economics? There's not too often that we see economics, but I think it's really important that we run economics. And this is why I like to give things like enzymes, guanidino acetic acid, a matrix value, because then you always know whether including it is going to save you money or whether including it is going to cost you money. So if you just add it on top or you just take an increase in energy, you have no idea of the economics. And for me, this is really, really important. And this is just the EPF, the European Poultry Efficiency Factor. And you can certainly see that the GAA treatments did pretty well and only slightly behind the Ross standard. Here's another one with cob birds, 1 to 35 days post-hatch. And here they've gone in where they've done on top. So for me, as I say, you want to know what the value of your product is in your finished feed. But what is interesting about this, and I think if we just focus on FCR, because The body weight gain was non-significant, but you can see FCR that if you go in and you add GAA with a reduced energy diet, you can actually recover your same FCR, but if you add it on top, it's about 4 points. Interestingly enough, I've had people come back to me and say, well, we can't measure 4 points very easily in the field. There's a lot of noise. I agree, there is a lot of noise. But the reality is that that 4 points is still there, even if you can't really measure it. And this one we've already seen. That was shown earlier on. So I'm going to skip over that, move into heat-stressed broilers. And with heat stress, we think that what happens is you get a reduction in creatine because the bird is heat stressed and is not producing efficiently, but is also using extra energy to pant. And this is extremely important in terms of heat stress. And the first thing that happens with heat stress, of course, is feed intake drops. And that's because the ability of the bird to get rid of heat is a problem in hot weather. And the only way it can reduce its heat increment is by reducing feed intake. But cellular energy demand doubles. So we think that oxidative phosphorylation is where the problem arises. And we have these oxygen species, these reactive oxygen species, ROS, that suddenly increase. And this might well be increasing the requirement for creatine. And there's some work on creatine, particularly lately, that shows a big advantage to using GAA during hot weather. And of course, nitrous oxide is required for vasodilation, and arginine is required to produce nitrous oxide. So that's part of what arginine's function is in the body. So let's have a look at another trial. This is one that was run in Belgium at Ghent University with male Ross 308 broilers. And here they've done a dose response. They've gone in with corn. All of the trials that have been done that I've gone over are corn, soybean, meal-based diets. I have the data available if anybody wants to see. But in this particular case, you can see they've gone in with either 0, 600 grams, or 1.2 kilos of GAA per ton. And in this case, what they did was they only started heat stressing these birds between 25 and 39 days of age, and then, of course, measured the broiler growth performance. So let's have a look at the average daily feed intake, feed conversion ratio, mortality, and EPF. What is interesting, and I find this fascinating, is despite the p-value not being significant, one can see quite clearly there's a dose response in mortality in heat-stressed birds. And remember, they were only heat-stressed for those 14 days from 25 to 35 days post-hatch. And you can certainly see that average daily feed intake is virtually unchanged. There's no difference. But look at the FCR. It's gone from 148, 600 grams at 144, so 4 points of feed conversion. And then between 0.6 and 1.2, very little difference indeed. But you can certainly see that the EPF was looking pretty good. And again, there's a dose response, although, and on an ANOVA, significant values achieved. If we plot these into a graph, and I must apologize for this graph, the resolution is not great, but what it does show you is that overall, when you have got GAA going in, your survival rate is a lot higher. And you can see there's a dose response between these two. So this is the survival percentage, so almost 10% around about, I think it's actually 9% mortality. This one is lower at about 6% mortality, and this one's lower at about 4% mortality. So in heat stress broilers, it would appear that GAA helps in reducing the mortality due to heat stress. When we run trials, of course, it's very difficult to pick up significance at a statistical level between mortalities in groups, but one can see quite clearly from this that it looks fairly promising. Here's another one, heat stressed broilers, and what was measured here was the amount of panting, and again there's a dose response, not quite significant, but definitely a reduction in panting and also a reduction in rectal temperature. And even 0.3 of a degree is quite important in terms of a reduction in rectal temperature. So it would appear that creatine, or at least GAA as a precursor for creatine, reduces heat stress in broilers. The other thing that I found really, really interesting was this effect of arginine and uric acid in the blood. And I think what is quite clear is you have a linear effect. Okay, it's only slightly non-statistically significant at 0.057 for uric acid. But look at arginine. Arginine is dramatic. We have a dramatic drop or increase in arginine in the blood as we increase dietary GAA. And this is important because obviously arginine is spared by using GAA in diets. There's another one that is quite interesting in terms of breast meat creatine and phosphocreatine in male broilers. And again, this is the birds that were subject to this heat stress. And again, we need to have a look at what is significant. And most of the significance lies in a linear value. So phosphocreatine, free creatine, total creatine, and in fact, phosphocreatine in ratio to adenosine triphosphate, also significant. So we can measure in the breast muscle creatine levels very easily indeed. And this is the effect of GAA as the precursor. What about the effect of GAA on muscle myopathies? And I'm going to show you a very complex slide, and I'm not going to go through this whole complex slide. But again, heat stress plays a role. So there's a link between heat stress and muscle myopathies. And we know this because birds that are subject to heat stress tend to show higher muscle myopathies than birds that are not subject to heat stress. The other thing about heat stress or muscle myopathy is that the quicker birds grow, the more they're inclined to have muscle myopathies. And I think part of that is the metabolic demand and the metabolically generated heat stress that happens in rapidly growing broilers. So if you slow them down, you get less of these muscle myopathies. The advantage with something like GAA, however, is that you can actually get a slightly heavier carcass yield without increasing the amount of these muscle myopathies that happen. And I'll show you a slide on that later on. But again, white striations, woody breast, spaghetti breast is another one that's come up. And all of these reactive oxygen species, these very high pro-oxidants, if you want to call them that, that happen in the bird. And we can alleviate this in hot weather with things like vitamin C at elevated levels and vitamin E. So these antioxidants work quite well during hot weather, but we can work with these in conjunction with something like GAA. So creatine deficiency leads to reduced phosphocreatine and that has an impact on ATP. Creatine deficiency also leads to an increase in these reactive oxidative species or molecules in the bird. So you have this huge increase in pro-oxidation products with creatine deficiency. So we know the mechanism about how this all works. Of course, hypoxia, blood oxidation, oxygen saturation, impaired ATP, vasoconstriction or vasodilation, creatine all plays a role in this. And here's another trial that was run on 708 Ross broilers, fed very low crude protein diets with or without GAA. And I wasn't really going to cover protein, but I think this one's quite important because what this one does, and it's a rather busy slide, it shows quite clearly that this withdrawal phase and overall average daily gain was significantly better in the group that was offered the GAA. Not much in the FCR, but remember again, this is not related back at all to the weight, so it's not corrected for weight. What is interesting is this one, the carcass and the breast meat yield. Now, these are small figures. I mean, when you talk about 0.3 of a yield, but I need to relate a story in a job that I worked for, an integrator in Australia that I worked for 7 years. We made changes and we added in GAA actually at 800 grams per ton. And about 4 weeks after adding it in, I got this phone call from the one area that was doing 2.2 million broilers a week. And they said, "What have you done to the feed?" And I said to them, "Oh, nothing. This is the usual thing you do as a nutritionist. I haven't done anything." But then I went back and had a look. And sure enough, it coincided with when we put in the GAA. And I phoned back and I said, well, tell me the bad news. And they said to me, "No, it's not bad news. We didn't say it was bad news. It's all good news. The good news is that we've seen this increase in yield and we've measured it. And we want to know what you've changed. Give us an increase in yield." So what you see here, if you look at each of these scores, 0, 1, 2, and 3 scores, you can see them over here. The dotted lines represent the increase in terms of breast weight, but there's no increase in these myopathies. And I think this is really important, that it can use GAA to improve yield, but it does not have a negative impact on things like muscle myopathy. And in fact, to quote Avigen, you can see here this compound appears to enhance productivity of broilers and doesn't make breast muscle myopathy any worse. They also said it has a significantly lower incidence of woody breast, white striping, ranging from 17 to 31% reduction. So within Avigen's own trials, there's been anywhere between a 17 and a 31% reduction in the incidence of muscle myopathy. So breeders and progeny. Now, this is interesting. And again, I won't spend a great deal of time on this because some of the information that I've seen is remarkable. And as a result, I'm putting in GAA at 1 kg per ton as standard across all my breeder diets. But one can see here, breeding in terms of breeder hens, we can measure very easily the creatine levels in the eggs. And you can see with supplementation, in this particular case, 1.5 grams per kilogram, so 1.5 kgs per ton. And as the birds age, this effect gets greater and greater. And if one looks at the right-hand side here and we look at glycogen, or you look at creatine, you will see that creatine is always stored preferentially in the breast muscle, even while the bird is an embryo. But you can certainly see glycogen declines dramatically as these birds are incubating. This is quite a busy slide as well, but all I want to show you is that creatine in breast muscle is always positive, and glycogen declines as birds go through to hatch. And this is really, really important, because if we can increase the creatine status of the egg and the yolk, we certainly have an effect on the progeny. And I'm going to quote this one. It's an interesting paper. It's from 10 years ago. He got remarkably high results. I'm not sure that 10 points or 400 grams of GAA is something that's repeatable. But in every single case that we look at, we are seeing an improvement in terms of supplementing GAA on the progeny. So if you just supplement the parent stock, you're getting quite a big impact on the progeny. So that was FCR. This is carcass yield. And again, this 0.3% or 3% in this particular case is definitely repeatable, and we've seen it on a big commercial scale. Now, if you're in a market that doesn't pay you for breast meat yield, quite clearly this is not something that you would absolutely consider. Nutritional matrix used for GAA. There was a question on the nutritional matrix. I tend to use this 10.6 because energy for me is based on oxidation, but in reality, the contribution in terms of sparing at the mitochondrial level is a lot higher. I'm quite confident that these matrix levels for GAA are pretty accurate. There's other things that happen with GAA. It improves the resilience of animals, and we haven't discussed a whole lot. There's improved bone development, for example, reduced impact of transport stress from farm, particularly to processing plant. Ascites mortality reduces, and then the ones that we've actually covered off down below. And with that, I think I've actually gone slightly over my time, but I just need to thank you all for your attention.
All right, thank you, Dr. Peter, for that very informative, very insightful presentation. We have learned a lot from both presentations today, and I'd like to invite our speakers, our presenters, to join with me in a Q&A. But before we proceed to our Q&A and answer the numerous questions from our attendees, I'd like to invite you once again to take another poll that we would like you to participate and to share your answers. And for this particular poll, you can actually select multiple answers that applies to you. And we'd like to thank you ahead for your participation in this poll question. And yes, all right. Our two speakers are here with me, and I think they are ready. We are ready to go into our Q&A sessions. Firstly, thank you, Dr. Peter and April, for those two wonderful presentations. And we have a lot to answer from our questions from our attendee. Let's start off with first question, and that is, all right, one of our attendees is asking, under serious heat conditions, how much creatine is required for per kilogram of feed? So I'll leave it to either April or Dr. Peter to answer that. Yeah.
This is a very interesting question, because we don't normally feed creatine. We are talking about GAA. So anywhere between about 600 and 1.2 to 1.5 kilos of GAA would provide more than enough precursor for creatine. So creatine per se is something that is in flux all the time. It goes between creatinine, which is the breakdown product, creatine, and phosphocreatine. And depending on the energy demand of the cell, it'll move up and down. I don't know what you think about that, April, but it's much better to give GAA than it is to try and supplement with creatine.
Yeah, I agree with that, Dr. Peter. We know the reason why we're supplementing actually GAA is that creatine supplementation, let's say through creatine monohydrate, is too expensive. Also, we see that it's not stable in terms of temperature. So GAA is the best source of creatine for animals, and I would agree that during heat stress situations, we have seen a good results when we use it from 1 to 1.2 kilos per ton of feed.
Thank you, speakers. Let's proceed to the next question. The question goes like this: what factors determine the different FCRs with GAA supplementation between each country?
Yeah, okay. I'll share our experience with this one. So there are actually different factors affecting the different FCRs with GAA supplementation, but the main ones are, first is the environmental conditions. We know different environmental conditions require different maintenance energy for our birds. So that is first. Of course, the level of GAA that we are supplementing to the diet also plays a critical role on that. The current bird performance. So let's say we are already seeing good performances, and if we use GAA on top, we won't see, that much further improvement versus if we are coming from a very low performance in terms of FCR. So and finally is also the diet composition. So those are the main factors why we're seeing different levels of FCRs from the different GAA supplementation trials.
Thank you, April. The third question is in the presence of other energy sparing specialties like enzymes, emulsifiers, do you recommend reducing or sparing energy by GAA?
Yeah, I'll answer that. I think for me, I like to give GAA an energy value and a matrix value, because that way you know exactly what it's costing you. It is completely independent of any enzymes or any other additives like lysolecithin type products. So yeah, absolutely, you can give it an energy sparing value on top of your enzymes that you are adding into the diet.
Yep, right. April, feel free to add if you have any additional.
Yeah, I think I also agree with Dr. Peter. So with the different mode of actions of these different ingredients, definitely we can still assume a matrix value from GuanAMINO.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you for that. Next question goes like this. The one attendee is asking if we reduce the arginine value in the formula using matrix, do we also need to adjust other amino acids? And if not, how can we assure that the amino acid balance will be met?
Yeah, this is a good question. I really like this question. I don't think you need to reduce your arginine in your diet. I think you can give your GAA an arginine value. Now, normally it's 77. I take a bit of a conservative one. I take 70%. Random figure that I picked for myself based on some of the work we've done. But if you give it an arginine value and you formulate to an arginine amount in your diet, you should still reach your balanced protein without without compromising the rest of your amino acids. You might be a little bit elevated in arginine, but to be honest with you, arginine, in some of the work we've done, can be anywhere between 105 and 115 times the amount of digestible lysine. We're still trying to get a handle on what the ideal arginine levels are. And the reason for that is because arginine isn't used only for muscle deposition, it's used in a whole range of metabolic procedures within the body. So we don't even have a really good handle on the ratio of arginine or digestible arginine to digestible lysine. I'm running at about 105. Dr. Michael Kidd's talking about 110, and there's some work going on at Sydney University looking at 115. So I wouldn't worry about that at all. I would give it an arginine value, formulate it into your diets. Usually corn, soya-based diets are not arginine deficient, but wheat, soybean diets often are. So it's often drawn for its arginine value. Sorry, long-winded explanation.
Yeah, so probably just to yeah, I totally agree with you, Dr. Peter. Maybe because I also saw one question related to arginine, in terms of replacement also with, with the source like soya, and also the cost of arginine. So I would like just to also clear and note that it needs to be noted that guanamino is the precursor of creatine. And the main function of GAA is actually to increase creatine level, leading to a more efficient energy metabolism. As we mentioned, we really get the value of energy with guanamino. And then the second effect will just be on the arginine. So if you are already using the energy sparing or the efficiency in terms of energy metabolism, then the second effect will be the arginine sparing. So if you use our recommended and approved matrix values, you will see that the product is always taken into diet from the linear programming. So as also mentioned by Dr. Peter, you don't need to adjust your minimum arginine levels in your formula. You just need to take a matrix of arginine with guanamino.
All right. There's still many more questions here. Let's just go ahead and select another question. Okay. Now this attendee is asking, in the use of additives with energy matrix, NSP enzyme emulsifier in corn soya diet, how can he use GA with energy matrix? And what is the highest possible reduction in energy that can all these additives together spare?
Well, this is a fairly random number, but I've kind of looked at it and said, look, with all my enzymes, with GAA, I'm looking at about 125 kilocalories per kg, and that's kind of where I've set my limit. And then I portion it based on, for example, phytase. I don't give that an energy value if I give it to my NSPAs, but it's just the way I do it. There's no right or wrongs with this. Just don't go too high with what you allocate in total for energy contributing raw materials. But do remember that energy is a function of the animal much more than it is the function of the raw materials. Yes, protein, heat increment of digestion, and so on is there, but the bird is very sensitive to energy and will react to all of these energy sparing ingredients that we now add. But as I say, my tramline, I said 125. It's actually exactly 126 because that's just the way it works in my matrix. Great question.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Peter. I'm not sure if yeah. Okay. Yeah, we still have a few more questions. I think April um, can address some of these. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, sure. I think I have also encountered this from this question from other countries. So, are there any long-term health implications for animals fed with guanamino enriched diets, particularly in relation to liver and kidney function due to increased metabolic processing of creatine? So we have not seen, and there is no negative effect on liver and kidney function when using guanamino, especially with our recommended supplementation rates.
I think there's some research that shows when you get up to about 2 kgs, it starts having a depressing effect on performance. So there is apparently a toxic level that we need to be careful about. And before you ask the next question, Alvin, I'm going to skip one over to Matt Hillier. Lovely to have you on board, Matt, from Australia. You want to talk about GAA inclusion in breeder diets? My standard is 1 kg per ton, is my standard in breeder diets, and it's in GGPs, GPs, and parent stock wherever I do it. And I've had fantastic results in Thailand, as an example, by, in, by including GAA in my breeder diets. Happy to share my matrix with anybody that wants to. Just pop me an email, and I'll share my matrix values that I have for GAA out of Alex, which is my formulation system, with you with pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Matt, for that question. All right, we'll have this as our last question. I know our attendees would want to ask questions for us, but due to the time that we have, we'll have this as our last question. The question goes like this: do we require GAA if we are using animal sources in a diet?
Yeah, I can take this one, and maybe also Dr. Peter can add later. So I have shown in my slide that, yeah, animal protein sources are can contains creatine, which can be a source. But if you looked at levels of creatine, it's highly variable. So it's not guaranteeing us a consistent level of creatine that is needed in the feed. um Probably if we try to analyze, let's say, each delivery, I don't think that will be practical. And I also took for the example of fish meal earlier, which contains the highest level of creatine among the three, which is MBM and also poultry byproduct meal. And then, yeah, even at 5% inclusion of fish meal, yes, it's providing creatine, but it's still not enough to close the gap in terms of creatine requirement. That is why dietary supplementation of GAA is still important in terms of providing and closing the requirement for creatine.
Yeah. Thank you, April. I'm not sure, Dr. Peter would like to add some uh, answers to that.
No, I think she's answered it very well indeed.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, we'd love to answer the questions here, but with the time that we have, I think that would be enough for now for us in today's webinar. And for all the questions that we haven't answered during this webinar, we will be happy to send them to our speakers and to Evonik to provide some answers. And I believe that our speakers and colleagues in Evonik have already answered some of that by typing them, and our attendees have also seen that. So for those questions that we haven't answered, we will follow up them to you. And of course, if you still have further questions after this webinar, you are free to email us uh, directly. And if you email to the email address that was used for Zoom, that for your registration, we'll be happy to send them to our speakers for them to get back to you. And once again, of course, we would like to thank our speakers for this wonderful webinar today, April and Dr. Peter. Thank you for sharing your knowledge in today's topic. And of course, to Evonik Animal Nutrition for bringing us this wonderful webinar. And I believe that this won't be the last that we'll be doing this together. as our attendees are looking forward as well to be attending another webinar in the future. And of course, we would like to thank our attendees. We appreciate your time and for your presence being here, and we welcome any feedback that you have in today's webinar. Please do visit eFeedLink Agri Digital Hub for more industry relevant presentations. And thank you once again for joining us today, and we would love to see you in our future webinars. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Peter.
Thank you, April.